Realize this. Judge Vincent Ratshibvumo, how are you? Welcome this evening to Life in a Garden Online.
Thank you so much. I'm doing very well, Mandi, and thank you for having me in your program.
You are one of the most esteemed members of the South African government and judiciary we've had on board. Or is there a distinction between judiciary and government? I know you wrote a paper on that.
Well, you're making me to blush now. Well, the judiciary is very much different from the government, while at the same time it's married to the government. It's a very funny kind of marriage, because when you talk of any government in the world, usually you're referring to the tripartite alliance, if we can call it. That will be the executive, which is the real government. You also talk about the parliament or the legislature, that's the lawmakers. And then the other arm of the government will be talking of the judiciary. These three operate independent from each other. And the judiciary is not part of the government, it's very much independent. Hence, judges preside over matters in which there's litigation against the government.
Thank you for that. I want to ask you a very personal question. After reading through your CV and 25 million diplomas and qualifications that you've gotten and all the papers you write, when did you have time to have 4 children?
Well, I am a family man, and I love my kids, I love my wife, I love the family. So you always create time well, but I must say that my kids sometimes are not very happy with me in that it's not always that I create time to be with them, with all the times to study and all the commitments are talking about, the papers to write. Surely one will not have 100% time to be with the children. But whenever time allows, I would have time to play with those kids. I do my best.
Are you a strict father? I mean, coming from a judicial background, do your kids get away with murder, so to speak?
You know, I try so much to be as strict as possible, but mainly I come from very humble beginnings of poor background. Having grown up in the rural outskirts of Limpopo and growing up in a family where I was raised by a single woman after my father passed on. Life was very tough. I didn't have everything on silver platter as I grew up. I had to fend for my rights. I had to struggle to be where I am. And one of the goals I had for myself was I wouldn't want my kids to go through what I went through. And unfortunately, in achieving and setting up that, you may end up relaxing so much and somehow spoiling the children, unaware that you're really spoiling because they have everything. You don't want them to go through what you went through. But in as far as I can, I try my best to be a strict father, more or less the way my mother raised me, a strict and disciplined woman.
That sounds about right. How did you manage to overcome obstacles and get where you are?
It wasn't easy. It must have been due to determination on my side. For me to be in your garden, by the way, while I come from those humble beginnings I told you, it must be due to the credit, or I will give credit to my motto, which is to the effect that your background need not determine your destination. One need not allow the poor background or humble beginnings to determine his future. We do not choose where we are born or how we are born, but as to where we die, as to our destination, it is in our hands. So of course I had to struggle. You know, you struggle against almost everything in life. When there's no food at home, it's a question of struggle. When you get to school, all the other kids may be having books, you don't have books, it's a struggle. So it was about determination and telling yourself you're going to make it against all odds. And once you tell yourself nothing is impossible and there's no mountain too high to climb. And by the way, mainly, I know when I was reading or doing a legal research, I did realize that at some point you hosted the authors of the book. I am writing a book about myself. It's still far from finishing. And by the way, it will not be released until I'm appointed permanently as a judge. Can you tell how confident I am? It's a book, unless I change the title, so far in my mind, I have the title as The Making of a Judge. It is intended to encourage kids who grow up in circumstances such as mine, difficult background, to tell them that irrespective of the background, you can still make it.
And yet so many faced with the same sort of challenges turn to crime instead. Because it's probably easier.
Say that again, sorry.
And yet so many people faced with the same obstacles that you've been faced with turn to a life of crime instead of making something, you know, of themselves personally.
Unfortunately, that is the unfortunate situation we find ourselves in our country. It's an international trend, I guess. People commit crime, and when you inquire why, they blame it on poverty. My view is, well, I understand that if it wasn't for unemployment rate in our country, crime level would be much better. However, there's no excuse for committing crime or living life of crime. Be you poor or what, it is in your hands to choose whether you want to be a criminal, you want to change the situation in front of you to make it level, though this mountain in front of you. There are many people who walk this road. I mean, I'm not the only one. Come to think of the former judge president of the Supreme Court of Appeal. At one stage, he was a petrol attendant. And there are many people, I can give a lot of examples. You can be poor, but it is in your hands to change your situation. Your destination cannot be determined by your background.
Okay. As my mother says, that's incredibly interesting, and so many people really don't subscribe to that, and it's quite sad.
No, it is upon us to try and change the world by seeing to it that as many people as possible can subscribe to that. Hence the efforts that I'm trying to make to see to it that this book I'm writing about myself will be out and can be read by so many children from
Here
the
we are.
rural.
Thank you. Thanks, my love. Thank you.
Oh, sorry about that. She was thanking you, my love. Anyway, is that water or wine?
Mm-hmm.
Judge, reading through the articles that you supplied me with earlier, I got a fair sort of view about you at being a man of justice. Your main objective is to make sure that justice is served, and yet you definitely have to be. You seem to be very strong on crime against women and children, and you're quite happy to throw the book at whoever perpetrates those.
No, you're very right. My call, of course, is to do justice to our people. And that one, that I regard it as a calling. We need to serve our people, and I regard it as service delivery to our very own people. When it comes to crimes against women and children, unfortunately, if you are guilty, you are in for a big ride. Our community deserves better. Our women deserve better. All the criminals, all the people who violate against women and children, they need to understand that the writing is on the wall. They don't belong to our community. They belong to the dungeon. And we will throw them to that dungeon without any apology. And that's what I've done. I mean, you better be innocent when you are tried, and you will be acquitted. You will be found not guilty. But if you are guilty, our women have a right to enjoy the freedom, the rights that we have in terms of our constitution, just as we, the men, are enjoying. They don't have to beg. It is their rights. And anybody who limits that right doesn't belong to this community. You have to be thrown away. And indeed, like you may have read one or two cases, I don't know, depending on the case, I wouldn't mind sentencing you to life imprisonment if you are guilty of violating women and children.
Where do you personally stand? As a personal opinion, I won't hold this against you. I have my own opinion on the subject with the death penalty. Yay.
Well, that one is very much academic as we speak, because whatever we think about the death penalty, the Constitutional Court has already ruled that death penalty is not part of our law. It cannot be part of our judicial system. Academic as it may be, I did a lot of study about the death penalty, even prior to it being abolished in our country. And I came to realization that there wasn't hard evidence to prove that those countries that had death penalty had their crime statistics favoring that the crime rate or serious crimes was low. There wasn't any such evidence. So as a result, unfortunately, I'm not part of those who had to make a decision on whether we should keep the death penalty as part of our law. But my views do not matter, but it's important for me to bring it to attention. Those countries that still have death penalty, they cannot boast of having low crime levels in those countries, unfortunately.
And what about aspects of Sharia law, like public canings, public floggings, things like that? Losing a left hand, losing a right hand?
Yeah, Sharia law can be a little bit controversial because it's the law that talks of arm for an arm. Well, that can be very cruel. But one thing for sure is that in our law in South Africa, that cannot be part of our law. Corporal punishment has also been outlawed. For some years, it used to be part of our law. You'll find it interesting, corporal punishment has been outlawed even in our houses. You are
Yes,
not going to chastise a child.
Why? I mean, if my mother gets out of hand, I like to give her a nice hiding to keep her back in line.
Unfortunately, no, not in this era. You don't want to invite the police in your house. You want to chastise your kid. The child will tell you, hey, daddy, you really want to beat me? Should I call the police? Should I call 10-111? Then you start scratching your head. Oh, by the way, you know your rights too much. But the only thing that may be part of our law, which is identical to this Sharia law, is that all the cases that are tried in South Africa, they are done in public. Everyone in the public is allowed to watch these matters, or these cases. You are allowed sometimes to even have the cameras in the courtroom. The whole reason is that whatever punishment that is being meted out to the criminals should be known to the public out there that so and so committed this crime. This is the sentence that was imposed on him or her. And I, for one, am in favor of that. There should be a lot of publicity of these cases as they're being tried. And in particular, the ones who are convicted of crimes involving gender-based violence. Those ones, my view is there has to be a lot of publicity. The reason for that is we deter somebody who could be thinking of battering his woman, who could be thinking of violating his wife, his girlfriend, but learning from whatever that is being publicized from the courts, we deter some criminals from committing these heinous crimes.
Do you really believe that a man who's going to strike a woman stops and pauses for 2 seconds to think, oh, shit, I shouldn't be doing this. I might go to jail?
There are those who stop and think, but from my experience, I can tell you this should not be the burden only on the courts or the judiciary. This should be the burden on the shoulders of the community as a whole. If we take it upon ourselves to train our children from home, because some of these things, you'll find it interesting, it comes from home. When these children see how daddy treats mommy, when we talk to our children and we talk about women with our boy children, as if these women are nothing, they are not equal to us. It gets embedded in their mind, unfortunately. So the duty starts from home. When we talk to our wives, when we talk to our boys, let them know that these women are equal. These girls, your sisters, are equal to you, the boys. The duty is also on members of the community, say the church leaders then. When we are preaching, let us try and preach the equality of women. Well, I do know that when you get to various religions, you could be talking of some being superior over the other gender, but we have a duty as pastors, church leaders, religious leaders, to try and train our congregants to understand that women are equal to us. We are not there to batter these, the strength that we have as men, the masculine part of us, should be there to protect the women as much as we can, to love them, but not to violate them in any manner. Once we do this, and the courts play their part in respect of the few who disobey this training and teachings, then I tell you our community will be much better.
Can I put this to you, that the crime stats were released, I think, last week or the week before. In South Africa, there's something like 58 murders a day, equaling 60,000 or something like that deaths a year. Of those deaths, only something like 30% are female. Why is there so much emphasis on the fact that women are being killed when the death of men far outweighs that of women, particularly in view of that men are equal to women? Did it make any sense, that?
Surely it does make a lot of sense. I suppose it's also because of the publicity that members of the media give to cases involving gender-based violence. However, I need to emphasize the fact that anybody guilty of gender-based violence, the courts need to frown at that. It could be gender-based violence involving a woman killing a man. We have to frown as much as we frown to gender-based violence wherein a man is killing a woman. However, I must also say to you, while we do not condone, and nobody should condone, the killing of men, you will find it interesting that a number of the cases involving the killing of men, you will find that the said woman did the killing in self-defense. In some of them, there are quite a lot of reported cases wherein the women had to kill their partners, and the court, looking at the surrounding circumstances, said, look, you had to do it, and as a result, we will give you the most lenient sentence if we are convicting you. In most of them, of course, the woman would have to be acquitted. But if it is deserved that she is guilty, you will find that the sentence is very lenient. But there are those cases wherein a woman will be motivated by greed as opposed to defending herself. What comes to mind is cases like State versus Peterson. Maybe you'll remember the Peterson in the Western Cape, wherein the greed of making money motivated, so the court found, motivated the woman to hire some assassins to come, pretending they were committing robbery while they were killing the men, while the whole attention was focused on insurance payment that would come out. And the courts will punish that woman the same way the men are being punished for the murder of their spouses.
Do you think that in the Annie Devani case, justice was served?
Well, justice, by the way, there is a verdict by the court. And once there's a verdict by court, there's no way I wouldn't see it as justice. It was done by the judiciary. The question of whether justice is served sometimes also depends on from which angle do you see this. You should remember, even in the cases wherein somebody is convicted and sent to jail, the relatives of that man going to jail may not see it as justice being served. They may see it as their breadwinner being taken away from them or something along those lines. In the Devani matter, I would say justice was served because there was full court proceedings and it came to the end the way it did. The man was found not guilty and discharged. You should remember, before anybody is sent to jail, the presiding judge or judicial officer, or the court, if I can put it, needs to be satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the man in front of the court, the woman who is being tried, is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. To the point that even if you give that person life imprisonment, you go to your home and sleep peacefully. Once there is doubt in your mind, that is what our laws say, you have to acquit. And just as it is said by another prominent judge, he voiced the view that I would rather have 10 men walking on the street who are guilty than have one innocent man sent to jail.
I don't know if you remember the details of the case, but the judge, the female judge, I think in that instance, would you shut up, please? See, I might have to do violence over here. Could you look away for a second? My little heckler on my shoulder. It's like a
Hitler or Heckler?
heckler, not Hitler. I do try to be professional about the way I do this, Judge, but I have a problem. She never knows when to shut up, you know. I mean, like, go back in your box, Mom. Anyway,
okay.
Sorry. So
you need a protection order.
I do need a protection order.
Live next door.
Yeah, she can't come within 10 meters because she only lives about 15 away. Do you, in your honest opinion, we won't tell anybody about this, believe that the judge in that matter, the female judge, even more surprisingly, why wouldn't she entertain the details about Shreen Devani's sex life and the fact that he had a boyfriend on the side? I mean, that for me is clear motive for murder.
Well, that matter was tried by the then Deputy Judge President of Western Cape. She's retired now.
You retire rich, Strike. Move to strike.
Yeah, look, the position is as follows. In trying matters of rape, you are guided by the Criminal Procedure Act. This is the set of rules that everyone who is appointed to be a judicial officer, to be a magistrate or a judge, would have excelled in that training. You get training, of course, at the varsity, but even in your life as a judicial officer, you keep getting trained on a Criminal Procedure Act because it keeps on changing from time to time. Part of the provisions of the Criminal Procedure Act are to the effect that when a trial proceeds on a charge, say, of rape, it is not permissible or allowed that evidence be led about sexual life, say, of the victim of rape. You cannot just bring about lifestyle of a person. Yes, a person who's telling you I was raped, and then the lawyer wants to just bring about the past sexual lifestyle. You have been a prostitute on these many occasions. The whole question is that relevant? If this person was a prostitute, does it make her to say yes to everybody who wants to have sexual intercourse? It's about relevance. Then come to the question that you're asking about Dewani. The whole question will be the question about his sexual life. Is it relevant in the case? Well, I didn't preside over the case. I'm not very sure what the position is, but I suppose if the court was convinced that there is a relevance about the sexual life about Dewani, then the court would have allowed it. If the lawyer or the prosecutor believed that there is a relevance thereon, the prosecution has a duty to convince the court it is relevant because of the following. You called all the authorities where such evidence was allowed, then you could easily persuade the court. As far as I can remember, I hope my memory is not failing me in this case. I think that man was found not guilty in terms of section 174 of the Criminal Procedure Act. That is the section that says when there is no evidence to answer at the time the case for the state is closed, you don't even have to let the accused give evidence. So he was acquitted without giving evidence or without telling his side of story. All this because of the too many contradictions that were in the case for the state. Well, unfortunately, I cannot sit here and defend that judgment because it's not my judgment and it was never taken on appeal or so, but I will just take it as it is from what is reported because I did read that judgment at some point. And from that judgment, it appears this is exactly what happened. There are many people who are accused of committing crimes. They go through the criminal justice system. Some of them, they are found not guilty, but depending on which side of the fence you are, you may see it as justice not being served. But if you are on the other side of the fence, you can look at it and say, justice has been served. And you say, my confidence in the South African judiciary has now been solidified because of that.
Or shaken.
Or shaken, depending on which side of the fence you are. Sure.
Can I ask you about farm murders? And let me clarify what I'm about to ask. I wonder myself if there are more crimes of, what did I say earlier? The fact that they're available. They isolate, farmers are available, they're soft targets. Or do you think they are racially motivated? I personally think there might be an element of racism, but I think it's easy to get to farmers because they don't have neighbors watching what's going on 24/7.
Right. Well, while there could be cases that are racially motivated, of course, I've presided over many cases that are racially motivated. We living in South Africa, we have those cases. They are in our newspapers on a daily basis. As of now, I'm not as yet persuaded that farm murders are committed based on race. Or put it differently, I am yet to preside on a case involving farm murders, which was racially motivated. I wouldn't exclude that there are such kind of cases. I suppose they could be there, but I'm yet to come across them. And so many of my colleagues have presided also on cases involving farm murders. They presided over farm murder trials as the other crimes, not necessarily motivated by the race. Just as you have indicated or pointed out, farmers may be seen as soft targets. And in most instances, that is exactly what the criminal is looking for. He's not looking for you to be African or to be white, black, or pink. He wants somebody that he can pounce and get his hands on his riches. And if he suspects that you could be having some good defense, he will leave you to go for the soft target. And the soft target, you talk of a farmer, he's staying alone, the neighbors are very far away, no matter how hard you scream, no neighbor is going to hear you. There's no security there. Once you get in, you can spend 5 hours in the house ransacking it, taking whatever you want. That's what criminals are looking for. Whether you are African, it's not what really motivates. Maybe they may look at you as African and say, because he's African, he has no money. They may believe that when you are perhaps white, you have some good cash. Well, still, it's not about race. It's about your possession and how much you could be a soft target. But whatever the position is, criminals have to be punished based on the crimes that they commit. You go and kill a farmer, as much as you go and kill any other victim who has a right to life, you have to be dealt with by the courts. And if there is evidence to show that you planned your crime, you had an opportunity to change your mind, but you didn't. You proceeded with the planning and execution of your crime, then that is premeditated murder, irrespective of the race of the victim. And in terms of our law, you have to be removed from our community for life.
Why do prisoners have a right to vote? I mean, by your very statement, you have been removed from the community, therefore you no longer have rights as an active member of the community. So why are you entitled to a vote as a member of the community?
Well, I wouldn't want to defend that position or even criticize, but thankfully, you are not even asking me to defend. You are asking me for the reasons why they have the right to vote. And I will tell you those reasons in terms of our law. And by the way, I'm not saying these reasons are good or they're bad. The prisoners have a right in terms of our law because even when in prison, they are human beings. Remember, you have to go into our constitution and say who has the rights, the Bill of Rights as entrenched in our constitution, to whom does it apply? You will find that the Bill of Rights apply to all human beings in South Africa. There are many people who come up with a lot of arguments, like what you're saying. What about prisoners? The question should be, are they human beings? If you tick yes, the next will be, are they in South Africa? Yes, then the rights pertain to them. Some extend it to foreigners in our country. Why do foreigners have all these rights? The question you need to ask, these foreigners, are they human beings? If you tick yes, are they in South Africa? If the answer is yes, the Bill of Rights apply to them. It means when you try them, whether they speak Lingala, they speak French, they speak whatever, they have a right to be tried in the language that they understand. So these prisoners remain human beings while they're in prison. And to make things even worse, whatever party they're going to vote for or whoever will win the election, it's going to be in charge of those prisons. Whatever they will be eating there in prison, it will be based on their vote or the vote of who is in charge of the prisons. That person will be in charge of deciding what kind of food they eat. Do they have a right to study? Do they have a right to exercise? What should happen to the prisoners? Should they be trained to rehabilitate so when they get out of prison, they are better human beings? So based on those laws, prisoners are still human beings and they have rights, and including the right to vote. Until such time that there will be a law that takes away that right, as we speak, unfortunately or fortunately, they still have those rights.
I think that you would be a hanging judge if you were given the opportunity. Just aside. You don't have to comment, don't worry. Have you read the book? It's just come out, The Misery Merchants.
No, I'm yet to lay my hands on that one. Well, I won't comment about me being a hanging judge, but you asked me about the death penalty a little earlier on. I forgot to tell you something that is also very much deep in my heart. That is about error in judgment. You know very well that whatever judgments that we impose or sentences that we impose, sometimes they go on appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal, at times even to the Constitutional Court. I also preside over cases from the lower court as an acting judge currently, when they come before me by way of appeal. From time to time, you will find that it seems as if my learned brother or the trial court made an error. And you set aside the finding by the court. They convicted somebody and you look at the circumstances and say, look, this person should have been found not guilty. And you release that person. The problem that you have sometimes in death penalty is, even if there could be error, there's no opportunity to rectify that error in death penalty. The error may be found some years later, but you can't correct it when somebody is 6 feet down. You can only look at it, lament, and go to bed crying without peace. Unfortunately, that's the position. But whether I would be a hanging judge, thankfully, you're not asking me that question. But one thing for sure is, if you are guilty and it has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty and you committed serious crimes, in particular, crimes involving gender-based violence, crimes against the women and children, you don't deserve to be in our community. We may not be having death penalty as it is, but you don't deserve to be part of our society.
Speaking of our society and crime, can we touch on justice in corruption cases? Why do they never seem to end? They just get postponed and postponed and postponed, and then they get pushed under the carpet. Like, do people expect the public to actually forget? We've got Jacob Zuma. We've got all the COVID-19 corruption that's going on, and the person who will remain nameless for this conversation, who's in charge of the corruption investigation, is himself up on charges of corruption. So where does the buck stop?
Well, unfortunately, there is a perception by the public out there that this is exactly what is happening, that these cases get postponed and postponed and then pushed under the carpet. And I wouldn't blame the public for having that perception, because if you ask them to give you examples, they are very quick to give you some examples, which when you look, you realize it looks as though that is the position. But may I point out that this practice wherein cases get postponed again and again, they are not limited to corruption cases. You will have a number of other cases wherein the same also happens. Unfortunately, all I can say is to decry that it makes our community to lose confidence in the judicial system, the criminal justice system as a whole. It was not supposed to be the case. That was not supposed to be the case. All these cases that are taking forever, I don't want to even mention any case by name, because some of them are still sub judice, as we call them in our legal terms. But cases need to have the end. But I can also tell you, we have many other examples wherein corruption cases were tried timeously and they came to the end. Suspects were sentenced. There are many, just that they may not be receiving as much publicity. There's no way that I will defend a case that is reported and it goes on for over 10 years before the accused can even plead. That is not called for. Our Chief Justice, in fact, expects that the trials, especially in the lower courts, should see the end within 6 months. They need not go far much further than 6 months. There will be exceptions, as we would expect, but even those exceptions, trials are not supposed to be going over a year while still on our court rolls. I can only decry it because that is unacceptable, and I wish each one of us involved in the criminal justice system can do the best that we can to see to it that even corruption cases can come to an end. It is this other or another contributing reason that when other people out there or the members of the community look, they are not deterred from committing further corruption cases, because when they look, they just say so and so is facing corruption, what happened to him, so and so. we have a duty to deter the community, and the other form of deterrence is when those who commit corruption or crimes of corruption are deterred by seeing what we do to those who are convicted in courts.
How could a judge in a case find that one party is guilty of corruption, yet the person that he was corrupt with was not guilty at the time?
Well, it depends on what kind of a case you have. Come to think of it, there could be a case like I've had at some stage. A police officer approaches a relative of the accused in a case that he was investigating, saying, if you give me so much, I will see to it that this case disappears. And that relative approached the anti-corruption unit, and everything was attended to, and they gave him money that was marked, given to the police officer. So in this instance, even though money exchange hands, you can tell that there's only one person who is corrupt. In instances wherein two people are being corrupt themselves, none being used, the truth of it is the two people, all of them, they are guilty, both guilty or equally guilty of corruption. However, the prosecution may decide, like they've done in many cases. You will remember, like in the case of a State versus Silevi, I'm only quoting cases that have been publicized, judgments of which are available for public consumption. State versus Silevi, there were two people involved in the corruption. The prosecution can decide to say, look, these people were equally involved in the crime. If we want to try all of them, we will not have a witness to tell us what happened, because they are the only two witnesses who corrupted each other. They can look at the case and say, look, this is the big fish that we want, or in our view, it is more unacceptable for A to be corrupt. While B, it's also unacceptable, but it is less. It is more unacceptable.
Sorry.
Yeah. Once you have that scenario, then the prosecution can say, let's use the one who was less, or we find him to be less when it comes to acceptability thereof, to use him as a witness against this one, against whom we are of a view that it is more unacceptable. Then you use him as a witness against the other. That, in terms of our criminal justice system, it's acceptable. The Criminal Procedure Act even sanctions it by providing, there's a section that provides for or some kind of immunity, that if you testify faithfully and incriminate yourself, then the court can make an order that you should not be tried of this charge. You are given some indemnity that you need not be tried.
Can I just point out that Shabir Sheikh is still alive and playing golf?
I also read in the newspaper, but what do I say?
I have dominated the conversation with the judge for the last 40 minutes. Is there anybody who has questions for the judge? You have him in front of you for the next 15 minutes or so, so it's a good time to ask. I must just tell you, Judge, that when I was chatting to Mo earlier, or Justice Juma for everybody else here, he said to me that when he has a problem with the law or some understanding of something, you are the go-to person, and that you are his mentor. And if he needs advice, you are the man that he goes to. He says you have a fantastic understanding of the law.
Did you believe what Mo told you? He's my friend. Eh?
Well, he actually married my mother for me.
For you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And Mo, I married him.
Oh, he didn't marry my mother. He came here and he married her to her husband. Sorry.
He was the
I signed him into a marriage, but I'm not going to go into details as to what happened thereafter. Well, what Mohammed Juma was telling you, it's I doubt if I would call myself, I know the A to Z of the law, But what he knows that I do is whenever he poses a question to me, I do a research. I research anything, and sometimes he could be posing a question on something that I've already done a research on, of which the answer would be available immediately. If I don't have a response immediately, I don't let him just go without a response. I tell him I will give him a call in about 20, 30 minutes, and I research on that, and I get back to him to give him a response. Yes, I am also involved as a facilitator. I train the newly appointed regional magistrates countrywide. And you are not just going to train these people without doing your own homework and preparation. And when you do this, when they ask you questions, they need to feel that it's like you prepared, you did your research or your homework. And that's the point where I come from. It's not like I know everything, but I know where to find everything. And if I don't know, I would rather go there. It's called the library, and I'll come back with the response. That's how far I'm committed to that.
When is your interview for your judgeship, permanent judge?
Oh, you reminded me that, by the way, I'm an acting judge. I'm to be interviewed sometimes in October. We were supposed to be interviewed in April, but then came this virus. They called it Corona. Everything was postponed. And I'm just hoping that come October, we won't be on a second wave or another lockdown level 5, so the interviews will go through.
Have you stocked up on cigarettes and alcohol?
Yeah. I suppose the shelves are empty. I heard some shops did not have cigarettes yesterday. They're supposed to have very much empty. One would have to wait until then. But anyway, thankfully for me, I do not smoke, and I do not drink. Remember that saying, as sober as a judge? I want to keep being sober.
Judges just practice that. Some of them
Drinking
drive it to
only
war.
Louis both.
Judge, what about the elderly? Let's say my mother murders me one day because I told her to go back into her box and keep quiet. Would you stick her 88-year-old in jail?
I suppose I would, but I must also say that when it comes to sentencing, there's no one size fits all. Each time you have to deal with sentencing, you have to look into 3 important things. Number 1 is the personal circumstances of the offender. 2, you look at the crime that was committed. And finally, you look at the interest of the society. The interest of the society may not be the needs of the society. You will have, from time to time, society members coming to court chanting, carrying the placards. They are trying to demonstrate their needs, but their needs may not be their interests. So you need to separate that. After looking at the interest, what does the society expect? Does the society want an 80-year-old woman languish in jail? But you have to balance it against what did this 80-year-old woman do? Did she steal some gel, sweets, or chocolate from a shop? Or did she murder a person? And of course, you look at her as a person. At the age of 80, does she have any previous conviction? Is she a first offender? If she goes to jail, who will suffer? Is she a breadwinner? Is she the primary caregiver to any child at home? And once you have that, you try and balance this without overemphasizing any of these interests and without understating any of them. Then you come up with a balanced sentence. In some instances, yes, you may send that 80-year-old woman to jail.
Yeah,
but in others, you may find that maybe she needs only correctional supervision sentence, which is a non-custodial sentence.
I'll tell you, in terms of my mother, the best sentence you could give her is house arrest. She hates being stuck at home all the time. House arrest would be the ultimate.
You will remind me when this sentence, this kind of sentence, the correctional supervision, it involves a house arrest. When it was just newly introduced to our criminal justice system or the Criminal Procedure Act. It was very much fashionable. Everybody was imposing it. And here is a man who I think he was convicted of culpable homicide out of a traffic offense. He was given that kind of sentence. He served it, I think it was for 2 years, if my memory serves me well. After 2 years, once the sentence was done, guess who came to court? It was the wife. She was coming to beg the magistrate to extend the sentence of her husband. We wanted to know what's wrong. She said, this man, from the last day he served the sentence, which was on a month end, he hasn't come back home. It's now a week. Life was good when he was serving the sentence. Can't you please extend the sentence? We want him back home, and life was nice. Unfortunately, you need to have a crime before you convict or sentence anyone, whatever form of sentence. It couldn't be, no matter how good and nice life was at home at the time.
There's that joke about the guy that wants to kill his wife, but he doesn't get it right or something. He wanted to get rid of her, and then the judge, as a sentence, you are sentenced to house arrest, and sends him home to be with his wife. I've messed it up, but that is the basic sort of context of the joke.
Oh, well, that's one type of a sentence. Well, no much comment on that.
Your Honor, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Mo was absolutely right. There are no questions for you, apparently. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And when that book is ready, send me a copy. Let me read it, see if the writing passes muster. And I know a couple of publishers that you could go and see as well. And let's read it and let's have you back and let's talk about your autobiography or your memoirs.
And
is it your memoirs?
You know what? Contracts do not even have to be on writing. What you're saying now is a contract, and I will hold you to that. And when you fail, I'm gonna drag you to court. Remember? I will.
Yeah, I can't afford a lawyer, so that's fine. My lawyer's retired. I mean, really, it's just rude. But yes, we have a deal. When that book comes out, we'll be back here. We'll be talking. Maybe we'll even be in the garden by that time.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Oh, wow, I can't wait for that. Thank you so much, Mandi. It was
Thank you
a
so much.
pleasure.
Have a great evening, everybody, and a great weekend. Bye all. Good night.